And the name of his house shall be called in Israel, the house of him who had his sandal pulled off. Old Testament laws don't get more obscure than this. Why does a sandal symbolize a reputation for greed, a reputation that would continue to haunt your children for generations? That answer and more coming up. Joseph Clampett here with Stewardship.com, bringing you the best biblical information on money to help you reach your God-given potential. Today's topic is Ruth chapter 4, in which Boaz steps up to act as a kinsman-redeemer. Now, what is a kinsman-redeemer? This is a pretty obscure Old Testament law from Deuteronomy chapter 25, verses 5 through 10. Now, this is the situation described in this law. So imagine you have an Israelite man who gets married, but him and his wife never have any male children. Therefore, he doesn't have an heir to come after him, carry on his family name, and inherit his property, his part of the promised land. So in this situation, the law called for the man's brother or his nearest male relative to marry his wife, hoping to have a son. And the firstborn son from their marriage would be considered to be the son of the man who had died without leaving any male heirs. Now, there was a certain process described in this Deuteronomy 25 passage for what steps to take if the brother or the nearest male relative was not willing to do this. So the woman would first, ask him to do this. If he refused, she would then go to the elders of the town or where they were living and present the case to them. So if the man still refused, even after talking to the elders, the woman would come back into the picture, pull his sandal off, spit in his face, and pronounce a sort of curse on him that, his house will forever be called the house of one who had his sandal pulled off. So his house, meaning presumably his heirs, his firstborn son with his original wife, who's, considered his own son, not his brother's son, would have this same curse or this bad name, bad reputation passed down to him because of what his father did and how his father was so focused on his own lineage that he didn't care about his brothers at all. How does this connect to the story of Ruth? So Ruth and Naomi are both widows in Israel without male heirs. Their husbands, Elimelech and Mahlon, who was Ruth's husband, both their husbands have died, and so they're needing, they're needing someone to help provide for them. They don't have the resources, two widows don't have the resources to take care of themselves. Naomi's probably, she's a little older at this point as well. So previously, Ruth had been gleaning grain from Boaz's field. He'd been treating her really well, even giving her extra grain. And now Naomi talks to Ruth and says, basically, I think our thought process is Boaz has been so nice to us, and he's a near relative of my husband and my son, who was Ruth's husband, so maybe he can be your kinsman-redeemer, Ruth. So Ruth agrees with Naomi to basically ask Boaz to do this. The full story is in Ruth chapter 3 of how exactly she goes and does that. One funny detail there is that it involves her uncovering Boaz's feet when he's sleeping. So again, I wonder if there's some connection to the sandal thing, I'm exposing your feet, which may or may not have sandals on them, but this is your chance to keep the sandal on your foot rather than getting it stripped off and spit in your face and getting a bad reputation. In any case, Boaz is more than willing to do this. He's seen Ruth's loyalty. He's seen how hardworking she is. He's seen how much she loves Naomi and has worked hard to take care of Naomi. So he's more than willing to be the kinsman-redeemer, to marry Ruth and carry on the name of Mahlon, Ruth's husband, and by extension, the name of Elimelech. So both those guys are Boaz's relative. But Boaz says, we have to slow down here. There's one guy who's actually in line before me. So this other guy is a closer relative to Elimelech and Mahlon than I am. So I need to kind of offer it to him first to redeem you. And if he's willing, great, then he can do it. If he's not willing, then I'll do it. So Boaz goes to the gate of the town. He waits there for a while until this nearer relative walks by, asks him to sit down and talk. So he does, and then Boaz also calls over some elders from the town to kind of witness the conversation that they're going to have. And then Boaz says, hey, Elimelech's field is being sold by Naomi. You're next in line. Do you want to buy it from her? The guy responds, yeah, he wants to. He wants the land. And then Boaz jumps in saying, okay, it's all yours. You can buy it. But when you acquire that land, you also acquire the wife of the dead man who used to, whose inheritance it is, in order to propagate his inheritance, basically, Mahlon's inheritance. So at that point, the guy, he's not so eager anymore. He steps back. He's like, I don't want to do this because I may endanger my own inheritance. He's not willing to do it. So at that point, Boaz says, okay, I'm going to do it. And then they have this interesting symbol of their transaction where the nearer kinsman, who was first in line, takes off his sandal and hands it over to Boaz. And so now Boaz has the guy's sandal. So it doesn't really explain that a lot, other than saying this was like sort of a custom or the method of almost like signing transactions. Makes it sound like a signature we would use today. This passing of the sandal was something like a signature. But I really want to focus in on a couple of the details from Boaz's conversation with this unnamed kinsman that I think really show the heart of that man, as well as, in contrast, it shows Boaz's heart in the situation. So let's look at Ruth chapter 4, verse 6. I'm just going to read that. Then the Redeemer said, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I impair my own inheritance. Take my right of redemption yourself, for I cannot redeem it. Okay, so two things here. Number one, that phrase, lest I impair my own inheritance. So there is some truth to this, that by taking this land, by purchasing the land, the guy has to put up some money, which is going to be given to Naomi to help take care of her. The guy is also taking on the responsibility of caring for Ruth and Naomi too once her money runs out. And what does he get in exchange for that? Well, his firstborn son with Ruth will actually inherit the land. It won't pass to his current children with his current wife or wives, and it won't be, part of his sort of legal legacy. So I think he's kind of saying, I'm giving up all this money, taking on the responsibilities to care for these two women, and I'm not really getting much out of it. So he's not that interested in this. The second thing he says that's really interesting is he calls it his right of redemption. When this is discussed in the Deuteronomy passage we mentioned, and it's really not presented as a right or like a privilege or a benefit. It's presented as a responsibility. It's presented as something you need to do for someone else for their sake and for their good. It's not like, you're next in line, you get an extra chunk of the promised land, like lucky you. It's no, you have this responsibility. Now contrast that with Boaz and how Boaz views the situation. He's not obsessed with just getting more possessions, more wealth, more land for himself. He's not obsessed with his own legacy through his own children. He's seeing someone in need two women in need who are widows, who are unable to take care of themselves, and he's ready to jump in there and do that. And it's an extension of the generosity he's already shown to Ruth through the gleaning. Now, in just a second, I'll describe the long-term consequences of Boaz's redemption. But first I want to ask you, why was the redemption of land and the bloodline so important in the Old Testament law? Let me know in the comments section down below. So what was the result of Boaz being willing to redeem Ruth, redeem Mahlon's line, and redeem the land? Well, the end of the book tells us that they had a child named Obed. Obed had a son named Jesse, and Jesse had a son named David. So as a result of Boaz's generosity, although he wasn't looking for anything for himself in this whole deal, he was in fact really richly rewarded with a legacy that's far greater than the unnamed nearer Kinsman-Redeemer ever had. We don't even know that guy's name. He's forgotten to history. But Boaz's name is still there. It's been passed down for thousands of years. And he became the great-grandfather of David, who was Israel's greatest king. He also, therefore, became an ancestor of Jesus Christ, since Jesus was descended from David. So how much better can your legacy be than that? Now, as we think about this story, just reflecting on it, it's good to realize that opportunities often appear to us as heavy burdens or responsibilities. But don't let that fool you. Take up your God-given responsibilities willingly. And like Boaz, may you find through them a source of purpose and significance. Now, Ruth left everything to follow Naomi back to Israel. In the next video, which you can find up here, we discuss a New Testament example in which Jesus called someone to leave it all, everything he had, to follow Jesus. Thanks for watching. Please hit the like button if you got value, and we'll see you in the next one.